This happened a few years back when my friends and I finished college. We wanted to celebrate a bit to start off the summer break. We all had small jobs, so we had saved up some money. We decided to go big and take a trip to Las Vegas. We first looked for hotels in the city, trying to find something cheap but still big enough for the four of us. We gave up on that and started looking for an Airbnb because most were bigger and cheaper. We found a few good ones, but chose the largest one with the most rooms. First forward to a couple of weeks later, our Uber picked us up from the airport and dropped us off at the house. It looked bigger in person, and we were excited to spend the next few days there. We unpacked and relaxed for some hours, as we were a bit exhausted from the flight. My friend Elisa and I were the only ones awake hours later. It wasn't very late, probably 8 or 8:30 p.m. With nothing to do, my friend suggested we walk outside to explore the neighborhood. I agreed, eagerly waiting to check on the new homes. Our Airbnb was nice, and the neighboring houses were lovely, too. We headed outside and walked down the street. After passing 6 or 7 houses, the street took a sharp turn, connected to another crossing road with homes on the sides. It was strange because these homes were unlike those we had passed by. They were worn-out shacks. It was weird to see such homes. We saw broken windows, missing mailboxes, and worn-out breakage signs on most of the doors. One of the houses had a sofa chair in the middle of the yard with stains on it. We agreed to take the next turn towards our Airbnb and head back. We saw a black car approaching us from down the road with its headlights off. As it came closer, it began to slow down and eventually stopped next to us. An older woman, probably 50 to 60, rolled down the window and, with a big smile, said that we make such a cute couple. She was making some weird expressions with her head and arms. She was acting really strange. I replied, "Thank you," to end the conversation quickly and get her to leave, which worked. She continued down the road and headed in the opposite direction. We took the next turn and found the street to our Airbnb. We were both shocked and creeped out by the whole situation. As we got to the driveway, we saw the old lady's car heading towards us again. We were halfway up the driveway when she stopped the car in front of the house. This time she looked at us without saying anything or showing emotion. She only stared at us. My friend hurried inside, and I quickly followed. I heard the car going down the road as I closed the door behind us. We stayed longer, closing the doors and windows to ensure she didn't return. We agreed we were probably okay after an hour, and went to our room, ready for bed. The next day, we told our friends what happened, and they were creeped out too. We told the Airbnb owner about the incident. We requested to cancel our third day and leave early, and he agreed. My boyfriend and I were visiting my parents back in Michigan for a few days. We didn't want to stay with them for obvious reasons. We found an Airbnb 15 minutes away from their house. It was a cute little one-bedroom condo, completely redone on the inside. The Airbnb was truly modern. It wasn't the cheapest, but had good ratings. However, we saw that some reviews raised a red flag about it. Most negative comments highlighted a strange relationship with the neighbor. It didn't bother me because I had weird neighbors before. I, however, brought the issue up with the owner before booking. She said the neighbor is nosy and sometimes gets defensive when people try to get into the Airbnb. The owner said she would let the neighbor know we were staying for the night. Everything went smoothly on our arrival day. We met the owner who lived nearby. She gave us the key to the entry door and the code to the actual apartment. We unpacked our stuff before heading to our parents' home for dinner. I had a few drinks before getting home to help me deal with my mother. It was around 10 p.m. before we knew it was late. We headed to the Airbnb and pulled out in front of our rental. Each complex had 2 apartments, 2 at the bottom and 2 at the top. The one we were staying for the night was on the top left. When we pulled over, we saw a lady staring at us behind the curtain on the apartment window on the top right. I felt weird. Who stares from their window like that? My boyfriend parked, and when I got out, I looked up again. She was still there, staring at us. She was somewhere between 60 and 70 years old. I had never seen someone as angry as she was. My boyfriend put the key on the door, and we entered. To our surprise, we saw the lady standing at the top of the stairs. She said nothing but stood there watching us. She was tiny and round, but from how she stood, we could tell her arms and legs were very thin. We looked at each other for a minute and began to make our way up. We walked up, and she stared at us with creepy eyes but never said anything. I kept looking back as my boyfriend entered the code. We headed into the apartment. "What the hell was that?" my boyfriend said softly, looking at me confused. I shook my head, wondering why she didn't talk to us. Nothing happened for the rest of the night until we heard banging in front of the door. I got up to check what it was. My boyfriend was already awake. The banging was nonstop for a minute or two until it suddenly stopped. I looked at my phone, and it was nearly 4 a.m. Who would be banging on the door at this time? My boyfriend walked towards the door, and I trailed behind him slowly. He looked back at me, clearly confused. He then opened the door to look around. I heard a gasp, and I slowly stepped towards him. Lying down in front of our door were 3 dead rats. We closed the door and decided to contact the property owner. I tried to sleep, but the images of those rats kept playing in my head. I looked at the watch, and it was 6:30 a.m. I got up to make coffee, and as I did, I heard the neighbor's door slam shut. I looked out from the kitchen window, which overlooks the parking lot, hoping to glimpse the crazy lady. There she was, standing and looking at our parked car. She wasn't looking at what was in the car. She just kept staring at it. She seemed so focused on our car for the longest time. She slowly turned her head to look directly at me. I jumped back and heard her shriek like she was being attacked. My boyfriend ran out of the bedroom, alarmed. We both looked out through the window again. The neighbor was standing there, holding her head while screaming at the window on the driver's side. She grabbed the top of the car, banging her head, and yelled things like, "Why are they here? They never leave, and when will they leave?" I started recording for insurance purposes. My boyfriend called the police and the owner of the Airbnb. The crazy neighbor was lying on the ground by the time the police arrived. The owner apologized, said this had never happened before, and refunded our entire stay. We got to see the lady taken away in handcuffs, though it took a while for her to comply. We never found out what was wrong with her. I now know that you should consider every review before booking an Airbnb. It was the end of April, and I was moving from my home in Chicago to Nevada. I hired a company to take all my boxes and ship them to my new house to make it a little bit easier for me. I wanted to go on a road trip down there and stay in a hotel or Airbnb during my journey as I relaxed for a few days. The entire road trip would take around 30 hours. I split those hours thrice and decided I would drive for 10 hours daily and stay somewhere overnight. After planning the time, I figured out that my first stay would be on the far end of Nebraska. I scrolled through Airbnb listings, looking for the cheapest option. Nebraska doesn't have much to see, so I wanted somewhere to stay for 8 hours and then head out on the road. I found a 1-story home with 2 bedrooms. Although I didn't need 2 bedrooms, the price was an excellent deal. Therefore, I didn't mind the extra space. However, I found it strange that they only showed a photo of 1 bedroom. However, it didn't make much of a difference to me, so I booked it, got ready for the next day, and went to bed. In the morning, I finished packing up my car with the rest of my belongings and started the drive. I left a bit later than I wanted. If you ever go through Nebraska, you will notice it's very plain. There are long stretches of hundreds of miles with barely any lights or buildings. I arrived at the Airbnb a couple of hours later. It was off along the long, empty road I had been on and down a short gravel path. I was initially disappointed because it was a little worn out on the outside compared to what they had shown in the pictures. I reminded myself I was only staying there for a few hours, so it didn't matter much. I grabbed a couple of my bags and headed to the front door. Usually the owners leave the keys in the key box and then give you the password. The place didn't have a key box at all. It never had a lock. It was one of those plain doorknobs you usually see on a closet door. I got uneasy, but had no option but to stay here. I opened the door and stepped in. To my surprise, it was pretty nice on the inside. Though small, the kitchen and the living room were well furnished and in good condition. I went to the first bedroom and noticed it didn't have a lock. Thankfully, the second bedroom had a lock. Therefore, I decided to unpack there. One thing, though, kept me creeped out about the second bedroom. A small old doorway was right in front of the wall next to the bed. It was about 3 feet tall and 2 feet wide. The more I looked at the small doorway, the more I creeped out. I tried to open the doorway but realized it was locked on the other side. The house owner probably stores cleaning supplies back there, but still, the door gave me creeps. I tried to unpack what I needed and began to prepare for bedtime. I woke up in the middle of the night after hearing a soft tapping sound coming from the bed's edge. I panic sometimes, but I do not get scared easily. I jumped from the bed and switched on the lights. The tapping sound on the other side immediately stopped. I grabbed everything I could and rushed outside, but it was dark and I could not see much. I swear I saw a man lying on the ground behind the house as I was getting my car out of the gravel path. I went down the road for about 30 minutes before pulling over and texted the owner to call the police, since someone could be in the house. I drove for a few hours before getting to a small town and parked in a parking lot to get some sleep. I don't know what happened in the Airbnb, but the creepiest part is that the message had been read when I checked my phone in the morning, but the owner never replied.